He was the city's most ruthless billionaire, betrayed by his own blood and left to die at the bottom of a freezing river. She was a struggling, single mother, living a quiet life in the woods. When she pulled his broken body from the water, she had no idea she was saving a king, and she definitely didn't know his assassins were coming for her next. What happens when the Ice King loses his memory and falls for the woman who saved him? And what will he do when he finally remembers exactly who tried to destroy him? Get ready for a story of ultimate betrayal, breathtaking romance, and the sweetest revenge. Make sure to watch this video until the very end so you don't miss a single shocking twist. And if you love thrilling billionaire romance, hit that subscribe button for billionaire love stories and give this video a like right now. Let's dive in.
The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Vance Tower penthouse. Lightning illuminated the city skyline, but it couldn't match the cold, calculating glare of Julian Vance. He was the city's most untouchable billionaire CEO, a man who built an empire on ruthless precision. In the world of high society, they called him the Ice King. To the public, his life was the ultimate billionaire love story. He was engaged to Elena Sterling, a stunning heiress. They were the golden couple. But tonight, that golden facade was crumbling. Julian stared at the glowing screen of his private terminal. The encrypted financial files he had just uncovered were a death sentence to his trust. Millions of dollars, siphoned away into offshore accounts, secret shell companies. And the names authorizing these transfers? Marcus Vance, his own half-brother, and Elena, the woman who wore his $5 million diamond on her finger. The betrayal was a physical blow. It wasn't just about the money. It was the plot. A meticulously drafted legal document, hidden in a subfolder, outlined a hostile takeover. A corporate coup triggered only in the event of his death. Julian's jaw tightened. The silence in the penthouse was deafening. They didn't just want his wealth. They wanted him gone. He slammed the laptop shut. He didn't yell. He didn't break things. That wasn't Julian Vance. He operated in absolute terrifying control. He grabbed his custom-tailored Tom Ford jacket and his car keys. He needed to secure the master server at the downtown vault before Marcus could erase the digital trail. Down in the subterranean garage, his sleek, pitch-black Aston Martin was waiting. The engine roared to life, a deep, angry growl that echoed his own internal fury. He tore out of the garage, tires screeching against the wet concrete. The rain was blinding now, a torrential downpour washing over the winding cliffside highway that led to the city. The speedometer climbed, 70, 90, 110 miles per hour. The wipers worked furiously against the deluge. Julian reached for his Bluetooth console. "Connect to Reynolds," he commanded. Reynolds was his head of security, the only man he trusted. The system dialed, but the screen flickered. A sharp crackle of static filled the cabin. "Signal jammed," the automated voice announced. Julian's eyes narrowed. A signal jammer in his own car? Ahead, the road curved sharply. A notorious hairpin turn hugging the edge of a 300-foot drop into the raging river below. Julian eased his foot off the gas and shifted to the brake pedal. He pressed down. Nothing. The pedal hit the floorboard with a sickening, hollow thud. There was no resistance, no friction, just dead weight. His heart skipped a beat. He pumped the brakes frantically, once, twice, 3 times. The car didn't slow down. It was accelerating, pulled by the momentum of the downhill slope. They cut the brake lines. The realization hit him like a physical strike. It wasn't just a corporate takeover, it was an assassination. The cliff edge was rushing toward him at terrifying speed. The steel guardrail looked like a frail ribbon against the dark abyss. Julian gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He wrestled with the heavy machine, trying to force a desperate drift, trying to scrape the side of the mountain to slow down. But the wet asphalt offered no grip. The car hydroplaned, spinning out of control. Time seemed to slow down. In that fraction of a second, Julian Vance didn't see his life flash before his eyes. He saw them. He saw Marcus's fake, brotherly smile. He saw Elena's painted, lying lips. The sheer audacity of their betrayal ignited a fire in his chest, hotter than any fear of death. "I will destroy you both," he whispered into the roaring chaos. Then the impact. The Aston Martin tore through the steel barrier like tissue paper. Glass shattered. Metal shrieked. The car launched into the void, swallowed by the darkness and the violently rushing waters of the river below. Then, silence. Only the sound of the rain remained. The next morning, the sun rose over a city in mourning. Every television screen, every news feed blared the same breaking headline. Tragic end to a billionaire romance. Tech tycoon, Julian Vance dead in horrific crash. Standing before a sea of flashing cameras at the Vance Tower Plaza, Marcus Vance wiped away a perfectly timed tear. Beside him, dressed in flawless designer black, Elena Sterling leaned into his shoulder, her face hidden behind a black veil. "My brother was a visionary," Marcus told the press, his voice trembling with practiced grief. "And I promise to honor his legacy by stepping up to lead this empire." Beneath the veil, a small, triumphant smirk played on Elena's lips. The king was dead. The empire was theirs. But miles away, downstream, where the river met the jagged rocks of a misty valley, the king was about to wake up. The cold, violent roar of the river slowly faded. It was replaced by a sound Julian hadn't heard in years, the gentle chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves. He opened his eyes. The blinding neon lights of the city were gone. Instead, soft, golden sunlight poured through a rustic wooden window, warming his battered face. Pain shot through his head like a lightning bolt. He tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed against his chest. "Don't move, you're badly hurt," a soft voice whispered. Julian blinked against the light. Hovering over him was an angel. Or at least, that's what his fractured mind thought. She had warm, honey-brown eyes, messy hair tied back with a simple ribbon, and a face that radiated pure kindness. This was Maya, a single mother who had built a quiet sanctuary in this misty valley. Where am I?" Julian rasped. His throat felt like sandpaper. Who am I?" Maya's eyes softened with pity. "I found you washed up on the riverbank. You had no ID, no wallet, just this." She held up a torn piece of a custom-tailored shirt. "You don't remember your name?" Julian searched his mind. He looked for a name, a face, a memory. Nothing. Just an empty, terrifying black void. Panic began to set in, his breathing turning shallow. Suddenly, a tiny hand reached up and grabbed his finger. Julian looked down. Standing by the bed was a little boy, no older than 5, with big, curious eyes. "It's okay, mister," the boy chirped. "Mommy fixes everything. I'm Leo." The simple, innocent touch of the child acted like an anchor. The panic subsided. Julian looked from the boy to the mother. "Jay," he blurted out, the first syllable that came to mind. "Call me Jay." In the weeks that followed, the ruthless CEO known as Julian Vance ceased to exist. In his place was Jay, a man learning how to live again in a hidden herb garden. Every great billionaire love story has a turning point. For Julian, it wasn't a boardroom deal. It was a patch of dirt. The hands that once typed out billion-dollar acquisitions now learned how to hold a shovel. He chopped wood. He carried water. He planted seeds in the rich, dark soil. At first, his body ached. The physical labor was grueling. But slowly, it became a rhythm, a meditation. The sweat washed away his lingering anxiety. The fresh mountain air cleared the heavy fog in his head. Most importantly, the terrifying nightmares that plagued his first few nights, flashes of shattered glass, a falling car, and cold, lying eyes, began to fade. They were replaced by the soothing scent of lavender and Maya's humming from the kitchen. "You have a natural talent for this," Maya said one afternoon. They were kneeling side by side in the greenhouse, transplanting delicate seedlings. Her shoulder brushed against his. Julian paused. He looked at his dirt-stained hands, then at Maya. The sunlight caught the stray hairs framing her face. He felt a sudden, strange fluttering in his chest, a warmth he had never experienced in his past life. "I think I just have a good teacher," he replied, his voice softening. Maya blushed, looking down at the soil. The unspoken tension between them was electric. It was pure. It was real. But it wasn't just Maya who captured his heart. It was Leo. Julian became the father figure the boy never had. He fixed Leo's broken wooden train. He hoisted the boy onto his shoulders to pick the highest apples. The lonely cabin was now filled with deep, booming laughter. One evening, after Leo had fallen asleep, Julian and Maya sat on the porch. The sky was a canvas of brilliant, unfiltered stars. Maya handed him a mug of chamomile tea. "You seem different today, Jay." "Lighter." Julian took a sip, letting the warmth spread through him. "I don't know who I was before that river, Maya," he said, turning to face her. "Maybe I was a good man. Maybe I was a monster. But I know this." He reached out, gently wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. His thumb lingered on her skin. Maya's breath hitched. "I know that whatever my life was," Julian continued, his voice thick with emotion, "it couldn't possibly be better than this, right here, with you and Leo." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes. She had been strong for so long, fighting the world alone. Now, staring into the eyes of this mysterious stranger, she felt safe. She leaned in, and their lips met. It wasn't the flashy, camera-ready kiss of a high-society romance. It was tentative, desperate, and profoundly real. For the first time in his existence, the ruthless billionaire wasn't strategizing. He wasn't plotting his next move. He was just a man, hopelessly in love with a single mother who had saved his soul. He had found his secret sanctuary. He had found a family. But true billionaire drama never stays hidden forever. The past is a predator, and it was already picking up his scent. The tranquility of the misty valley was shattered not by a storm, but by the violent roar of heavy engines. Headlights slashed through the darkness, illuminating the fragile glass of Maya's greenhouse. 3 heavy pickup trucks skidded to a halt, their tires tearing up the delicate herb beds. Men piled out, armed with baseball bats and iron crowbars. They weren't just vandals. They were enforcers hired by a local developer who wanted to force the single mother off her property. "Smash it all! Leave nothing standing," the leader barked. The horrifying sound of shattering glass pierced the night as a bat swung into the greenhouse. Inside the cabin, Maya gasped, pulling little Leo tightly into her arms. The boy trembled against her chest. But Julian didn't cower. Something primal and dangerous shifted in his eyes. He grabbed a heavy wooden axe handle resting beside the door. "Stay here and lock the door," he ordered Maya. His voice carried an authority that brooked no argument. Julian stepped out into the chaos. He didn't remember knowing how to fight. But as the first thug lunged at him, muscle memory took over. He dodged the wild swing with calculated precision and delivered a bone-crushing blow to the man's ribs. He fought like a machine, ruthless and brutally efficient. But there were too many of them, As Julian spun around to disarm a man rushing toward the cabin, toward Maya and Leo, another thug crept up from the shadows behind him. A heavy iron pipe swung through the air. The sickening crack echoed loudly across the yard. Julian collapsed, blood instantly staining the side of his head. Seeing him fall, the thugs panicked. Sirens began to wail in the far distance. They scrambled into their trucks and sped off into the night. "Jay!" Maya's scream tore through the darkness. She flung the door open and fell to her knees in the mud, pressing her trembling hands against his bleeding wound. For 3 agonizing days, a severe fever raged through Julian's body. Maya never left his side. She bathed his forehead with cool mountain water and crushed her most potent healing herbs to stop the infection. She prayed silently, terrified of losing the man who had risked his life for them. When Julian finally opened his eyes, the fever had broken. The very first thing he felt was a tiny, warm hand gripping his fingers. Leo was fast asleep, his head resting gently on the edge of the mattress. Maya was sitting in a chair nearby, fast asleep from exhaustion, dark circles under her beautiful eyes. A profound, overwhelming wave of emotion washed over him. He realized how deeply he loved this little family. They were his world now. But as he stared at the wooden ceiling, the fog in his mind suddenly cleared completely. The blow from the iron pipe hadn't just broken his skin. It had shattered the dam holding back his memories. Flash, the penthouse suite. Flash, the offshore bank statements. Flash, the fake smile of his brother, Marcus. Flash, the failing brakes and the plunge into the dark abyss. He wasn't Jay, the gentle gardener. He was Julian Vance, the billionaire CEO, and he had been assassinated by his own flesh and blood. The gaze of the Ice King returned to his eyes, cold, sharp, and calculating. But as he looked back at Maya and Leo, the coldness vanished, replaced by a fierce, protective fire. He knew the truth. If his enemies discovered the billionaire was still alive, they wouldn't just come for him. They would execute Maya and the boy without a second thought, to protect the only people he truly cared about. Julian knew he had to play the ultimate game of deception. He had to keep his identity a secret, even from the woman he loved. During the daylight, he played his part perfectly. He was Jay, the loving partner, slowly recovering from a concussion. He smiled, he kissed Maya, and he helped rebuild the shattered garden. Their billionaire love story was perfectly hidden beneath the guise of an ordinary, rustic life. But when night fell and the cabin was entirely silent, the apex predator awoke. Julian silently slipped out of bed, leaving Maya sleeping peacefully. He walked to the dusty storage shed and pulled out her old, outdated laptop. For a man who built a tech empire, it was more than enough. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He bypassed the local firewalls, routing his connection through ghost servers to make his digital footprint completely untraceable. He accessed the dark web, opening an encrypted channel known only to one man on Earth. Reynolds, his fiercely loyal head of security. Julian typed a single phrase. Code. The phoenix rises from the frost. 4 minutes of agonizing silence passed. Then the screen blinked. A reply appeared. Sir? Is it really you? We buried an empty casket. Julian smiled grimly in the dark shed. It's me. I need eyes on Marcus and Elena. Track every offshore account, every email. They think they've won the empire. Consider it done, Mr. Vance. The reply came instantly. What are your orders? Julian looked through the small window toward the cabin. His heart softened for a fraction of a second, before hardening into impenetrable steel. He typed his final command for the night. Gather the evidence. Prepare the board of directors. The dead man is coming home. For 3 weeks, Julian lived a double life. By day, he was Jay. the devoted partner helping a beautiful single mother rebuild her greenhouse. By night, he was the phantom billionaire CEO, meticulously orchestrating his resurrection. The glowing screen of the outdated laptop was his only weapon. On the encrypted dark web channel, the final puzzle piece dropped. Reynolds, his loyal head of security, sent the file. Target acquired. We have the wire transfers tracing back to Marcus. We also have the security footage from the underground garage. He paid the mechanic to cut your brake lines. Julian stared at the evidence. The trap was fully set. It was airtight. He closed the laptop and walked into the bedroom. The moonlight spilled over Maya and little Leo, asleep in a peaceful tangle of blankets. Julian's chest tightened. He wanted nothing more than to stay in this hidden valley forever. This was the only real billionaire love story he had ever known. One built on dirt, sweat, and genuine affection, not stock options and PR stunts. But to protect the single mother who saved his soul, the Ice King had to return to the battlefield. He leaned down, pressing a lingering, heartbreaking kiss to Maya's forehead. "I will be back for you," he whispered into the dark. "I promise." Before the sun rose over the misty mountains, Julian Vance was gone. 100 miles away, the skyline of the city gleamed aggressively in the morning light. The glass pinnacle of the Vance Tower pierced the clouds. Inside the ultra-luxurious penthouse boardroom, the atmosphere was a mix of calculated grief and ruthless ambition. The entire board of directors was gathered around the massive mahogany table. Sitting at the head of the table, in Julian's chair, was Marcus. He wore a triumphant smirk barely disguised as a solemn frown. Next to him sat Elena, draped in designer mourning clothes, looking every bit the tragic, supportive widow. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "My brother's sudden, tragic passing has left a void in all our hearts. But Vance Industries cannot stall. We must look to the future." An older board member slid a thick, leather-bound document across the table. "This is the emergency succession protocol, Marcus. With your signature, you legally assume the title of CEO and inherit Julian's controlling shares." Marcus picked up the solid gold fountain pen. His hand trembled slightly, not from grief, but from pure, unadulterated greed. He had won. The empire was finally his. He touched the nib to the paper. Suddenly, the heavy, soundproof double doors of the boardroom violently swung open. The heavy thud echoed like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Stepping through the threshold, flanked by 4 massive private security contractors led by Reynolds, was a ghost. Julian Vance. He wasn't the bruised, mud-stained gardener anymore. He was draped in a razor-sharp, bespoke black suit. His hair was impeccably styled, but it was his eyes that sucked the air out of the room. They were terrifyingly cold, focused, and burning with hellfire. The silence was absolute. Someone dropped a glass of water. It shattered on the marble floor, but no one blinked. The gold pen slipped from Marcus's fingers and clattered onto the table. His face drained of all color, turning an ashen, sickly gray. Julian?" He choked out, staring as if looking at a demon. Elena gasped, clutching her chest, her carefully painted facade completely crumbling in an instant. Julian didn't rush. He walked slowly, deliberately, his expensive leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the floor. Every step was a countdown to their destruction. He stopped at the head of the table. He looked down at Marcus, who was visibly shaking in the leather executive chair. "I believe," Julian said, his voice a low, lethal whisper that carried to every corner of the room. "That seat is taken." Marcus scrambled out of the chair as if it had caught fire, stumbling backward. Julian calmly took his seat. He looked at the bewildered board members, then at Elena, whose eyes were wide with terror. "It seems reports of my death were prematurely celebrated," Julian announced. "Julian, darling, you're alive!" Elena suddenly shrieked, snapping out of her shock. She lunged forward, trying to throw her arms around him, desperate to play the relieved fiancée. "Don't touch me," Julian commanded. The sheer venom in his tone stopped her dead in her tracks. He casually tossed a thick manila folder onto the center of the mahogany table. It slid and hit Marcus's emergency succession document. "While I was dead, I had some time to review the company's recent transactions," Julian said, leaning back, tenting his fingers. "Fascinating reading. Offshore shell companies in the Caymans. $15 million funneled out of our R&D budget. Authorized by my brother." The board members began murmuring in shock, grabbing the documents from the folder. That's a lie. A fabrication." Marcus stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. "You were in a crash. You're not thinking straight." Julian didn't flinch. He signaled to Reynolds, who clicked a remote. The massive flat-screen monitor on the boardroom wall flickered to life. It played high-definition security footage from the executive garage. It clearly showed Marcus handing a thick envelope of cash to a mechanic, pointing directly to the underside of Julian's Aston Martin. The room erupted in gasps. The undeniable proof of attempted murder was playing on a loop. "A hostile takeover is one thing, Marcus," Julian said softly, the silence cutting through the chaos. "Tampering with my brakes is another." Right on cue, the boardroom doors opened again. This time, it wasn't security. It was the city police, led by 2 detectives. "We're Marcus Vance," the lead detective announced, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You are under arrest for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and the attempted murder of Julian Vance." Marcus didn't fight back. His legs gave out, and he was dragged out of the boardroom in a state of catatonic shock, his golden empire reduced to ashes in less than 5 minutes. Elena was left trembling, backed against the glass wall. She looked at Julian, her eyes welling with real tears of panic now. Julian didn't even look at her. He turned to the stunned board of directors. "You gentlemen," the Billionaire CEO said, adjusting his cuffs with chilling composure. "Meeting adjourned. Now get out of my office." As the room cleared out, Julian sat alone in the immense penthouse. He had reclaimed his throne. He had destroyed his enemies. But as he looked out over the sprawling, glittering city, he felt no joy. The air here was cold. It smelled of ozone and deceit. He closed his eyes, and all he could see were honey-brown eyes and a ramshackle greenhouse. The billionaire had his empire back, but his heart was still 100 miles away, with a single mother in a misty valley. The rain had stopped, but the atmosphere inside the Vance Tower was suffocating. The doors to the CEO's office slowly creaked open. Elena Sterling stood there, looking like a shattered porcelain doll. Her designer clothes were rumpled, her makeup stained with tears. She fell to her knees before Julian's massive obsidian desk. The woman who had plotted to kill him was now weeping, begging for scraps of his mercy. "Julian, please," she sobbed, reaching out to touch his shoe. "Marcus forced me. He manipulated me. We have 10 years together. You can't just throw me away. I love you." Julian looked down at her. 6 months ago, the Ice King would have destroyed her family, seized her assets, and locked her in a cell forever. But as he looked at Elena's pathetic display, he didn't feel rage. He just felt utterly empty. He remembered the scent of lavender and the innocent laugh of a little boy. "Get up, Elena," Julian said, his voice void of any emotion. "You're embarrassing yourself." She looked up, a glimmer of desperate hope in her eyes. "I'm not going to hand the murder evidence over to the police," Julian continued calmly. Consider it my final payment for our wasted years. But you are stripped of your shares, your title, and your access to this building. Leave this city. If I ever see your face again, I will ruin you." Elena's face twisted. The mercy of the billionaire CEO felt like a slap in the face. She had expected rage, not pity. She stumbled out of the tower, stripped of her crown. But Elena Sterling wasn't a woman who accepted defeat. Her humiliation quickly morphed into a toxic, burning madness. She hired an underground private investigator to track Julian's movements. She wanted to know why he was so calm, why he had spared her. 2 days later, a thick envelope was slid under her hotel room door. Inside were photographs. Julian Vance, the untouchable titan of industry, wearing a faded plaid shirt, smiling warmly as he built a wooden swing for a little boy. Standing next to him was a woman in an apron, her hair tied up in a messy bun. A single mother? Elena hissed, her hands shaking violently as she crushed the photo. He left me. For a peasant? For a dirty single mother in the woods? The jealousy completely shattered her sanity. She didn't want the empire anymore. She just wanted to watch Julian suffer. She made a single phone call to a fixer in the criminal underworld. "Burn the greenhouse down, and make sure the woman and the brat don't make it out." Night fell over the misty valley. Maya was reading a bedtime story to Leo when she heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. She peeked through the window. 2 massive, unmarked black SUVs were idling outside. 4 men wearing tactical gear and carrying jerry cans of gasoline stepped out. Panic seized her throat. This wasn't the local developers' thugs. These were professional killers. "Leo, hide under the bed," Maya whispered frantically, grabbing a heavy cast-iron pan. She positioned herself between the bedroom door and her son, ready to die to protect him. The front door was violently kicked open. The heavy boots thumped across the wooden floorboards. The smell of gasoline filled the cabin, just as the lead assassin raised his weapon toward the bedroom door. The sky above them exploded with a deafening roar. A military-grade helicopter swept low over the cabin, its massive spotlight pinning the assassins like rats in the dirt. Before the thugs could react, 3 black armored cars smashed through the front gates. Heavily armed security operatives poured out, neutralizing the assassins in seconds. Through the blinding lights and the dust, a figure walked out of the darkness. It was Julian. He didn't look like Jay the gardener. He was the billionaire CEO, radiating absolute terrifying power. He stepped over the pinned assassins, kicking a dropped weapon out of the way, and rushed into the cabin. "Maya!" he yelled. She lowered the cast-iron pan, her eyes wide with shock. "Jay? How?" Julian pulled her and Leo into a crushing embrace, burying his face in her hair. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I brought this to your door. They will never touch you again." The next morning, a private jet sat on the tarmac of the city airport. Elena Sterling was sipping champagne, waiting to flee the country. The cabin door opened, but it wasn't the pilot. Julian walked in, his eyes as dead and cold as the bottom of the ocean. Behind him were 3 heavily armed police officers. Elena dropped her crystal glass. It shattered, spilling champagne across the luxurious carpet. "You touched my family," Julian said, his voice a lethal whisper. "You crossed the only line I have left." He dropped an audio recorder on the table. It played her exact conversation with the underground fixer. "You had a chance to walk away," Julian sneered. "Now you will rot in a cage for the rest of your miserable life." "Julian, no. I did it for us." Elena screamed as the officers violently twisted her arms behind her back and clamped cold steel handcuffs onto her wrists. She was dragged out of the plane, kicking and wailing, her high society facade destroyed forever. Julian watched her go, feeling nothing but a profound sense of relief. The toxicity of his old life was finally excised. He walked out of the airport and instructed his driver. "Don't take me to the tower. Take me home." The misty valley was bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. Julian stepped out of his car. He slowly took off his expensive silk tie and draped it over the fence. He unbuttoned his collar, letting the fresh, clean mountain air hit his chest. He walked toward the greenhouse. Maya was there, repotting a resilient little herb that had survived the chaos. Leo was running around, chasing a butterfly. Maya looked up. Her eyes met his, and a slow, radiant smile spread across her face. Julian walked over to her, pulling her close. His expensive suit was immediately stained with soil from her apron, but he didn't care. He kissed her, deeply and passionately, right there in the dirt. "Are you back for good, Jay?" Leo asked, tugging at Julian's pant leg. Julian picked the boy up, hoisting him onto his broad shoulders. He looked out over the simple wooden cabin, the green mountains, and the woman who held his heart. This wasn't a corporate takeover. It wasn't a boardroom victory. It was the ultimate, authentic, billionaire love story. "Yeah, buddy," Julian smiled. "The Ice King melted forever. I'm right where I belong. This is my empire."
Julian traded his cold, lonely empire for a kingdom built on true love. And Elena and Marcus learned the hard way that you never cross the Ice King, especially when it comes to his family. What an incredible journey. What was your favorite moment in this story? Do you think Elena got the punishment she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love reading them. If Julian and Maya's story touched your heart, please leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to Billionaire Love Stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next exciting tale of wealth, drama, and romance. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.